Chapter 24 or Book 2, Part 11. Hunger as Pain, Kumiko's Long Letter, Bird as Prophet. I fell asleep a few times and woke up just as often. These were short, unsettled snatches of sleep, as on an airplane. Whenever deep sleep was about to arrive, I would shrink back and wake up. Whenever full wakefulness was about to arrive, I would drift off into sleep, in endless repetition. Without changes in the light, time wobbled by like a wagon with a loose axle. My crumpled, unnatural posture robbed my body of a rest in small, accumulating doses. Each time I woke, I would check the time on my watch. Its pace was heavy and uneven. With nothing better to do, I would pick up the flashlight and shine it at random, at the ground, at the walls, at the well cover. What I found there was always the same ground, the same walls, the same well cover. The shadows cast by the moving beam would sway, stretch and shrink, swell and contract. When I tired of this, I would spend time feeling my face, probing every line and crevice, examining my features anew to learn their shape. I had never been seriously concerned about the shape of my ears before this. If someone had told me to draw a picture of my own ears, even a rough sketch, I would have been at a loss. Now, though, I would have been able to reproduce every hollow and curve in accurate detail. I found it odd how different the ears were. I had no idea how this had come about or what effect this lack of symmetry might have. It probably had some effect. The hands of my watch showed 7:28. I must have looked at my watch some 2,000 times since coming down here. Now it was 7:28 at midnight. That much was certain. At a ball game, it would be the bottom of the third or top of the fourth. When I was a kid, I used to like to sit high in the outfield stands and watch the summer day trying not to end. The sun had sunk below the western horizon, but the afterglow was still brilliant and beautiful. The stadium lights stretched their long shadows across the field as if to hint at something. First one, and then another light, would be turned on with the utmost caution shortly after the game got going. Still, there was enough light in the sky to read a newspaper by. The memory of the long day's glow remained at the door to keep the summer night from entering. With patience and persistence, though, the artificial illumination was winning its quiet victory over the light of the sun, bringing forth a flood of festive colors. The brilliant green of the playing field, the handsome black earth, the straight white lines newly drawn upon it, the glinting varnish on the bats of players waiting for their turn at the plate, the cigarette smoke floating in the beams of light, looking on windless days like souls wandering in search of someone to take them in. All these would begin to show up with tremendous clarity. The young beer sellers would hold their hands up in the light, flashing bills stuck between their fingers. The crowd would rise from their seats to follow the path of a high fly ball, their voices rising with its arc or dissolving into a sigh. Small flocks of birds returning to their roosts would fly past toward the sky. This was the stadium at 7:30 in the evening. I thought about the baseball games I had seen over the years. The St. Louis Cardinals had come to Japan once, when I was little, for a friendship game. I had seen that one with my father from an infield seat. Before the game itself, the Cardinals players stood along the perimeter of the field with baskets full of autographed tennis balls, throwing them into the stands as fast as they could. People went crazy trying to grab a ball for themselves, but I just stayed in my seat without moving, and before I knew it, I had a ball in my lap. It was a magical happening, strange and sudden. I looked at my watch again, 7:36. 8 minutes had gone by since the last look, just 8 minutes. I took the watch off and held it against my ear. It was ticking away just fine. I shrugged my shoulders in the darkness. Something strange was happening to my sense of time. I decided not to look at my watch for a while. Maybe I didn't have anything else to do, but it wasn't healthy to be looking at a watch this often. I had to make a tremendous effort to keep myself from looking, though. The pain was like what I had felt when I quit smoking. From the moment I decided to give up thinking about time, my mind could think of nothing else. It was a kind of contradiction, a sideways split. The more I tried to forget about time, the more I was compelled to think about it. Before I knew it, my eyes would be seeking out the watch on my left wrist. Whenever this happened, I would avert my face, close my eyes, and struggle not to look. I ended up taking the watch off and stuffing it into my knapsack. Even so, my mind went on groping for the watch inside the pack, where it continued to tick off the time. And so time flowed on through the darkness, deprived of advancing watch hands, time undivided and unmeasured. Once it lost its points of demarcation, time ceased being a continuous line and became instead a kind of formless fluid that expanded or contracted at will. Within this kind of time, I slept and woke and became slowly and increasingly accustomed to life without timepieces. I trained my body to realize that I no longer needed time, but soon I was feeling tremendous anxiety. True, I had been liberated from the nervous habit of checking my watch every 5 minutes, but once the frame of reference of time faded completely away, I began to feel as if I had been flung into the ocean at night from the deck of a moving ship. No one noticed my screams, and the boat continued its forward advance, moving farther and farther away until it was about to fade from view. Abandoning the effort, I took the watch from the knapsack and returned it to my wrist. The hands were pointing to 6:15, probably 6:15 a.m. The last time I had looked at my watch, it had been 7:36. 7:36 at night. It seemed reasonable to conclude that 11 hours had gone by since then. It could hardly have been 23 hours, but I could not be sure. What was the essential difference between 11 hours and 23 hours? Whichever it was, 11 or 23, my hunger had become far more intense. The sensation was nothing like what I had vaguely imagined an intense hunger to be. I had assumed that hunger would be a feeling of absence. Instead, it was closer to pure physical pain, utterly physical and utterly direct, like being stabbed or throttled. And the pain was uneven. It lacked consistency. It would rise like a swelling tide until I was on the verge of fainting, and then it would gradually recede. To divert my attention from these intensely painful hunger pangs, I tried to concentrate my thoughts on something else, but it was no longer possible for me to do any serious thinking. Fragmentary thoughts would drift into my mind, then disappear just as quickly as they had come. Whenever I tried to grab one, it would slip through my fingers like some slimy, shapeless animal. I stood up and stretched and took a deep breath. Every part of my body hurt. Every muscle and joint cried out in pain from having been in an awkward position for so long. I stretched myself slowly upward, then did some knee bends, but after 10 of those I felt dizzy. Sitting down again on the well floor, I closed my eyes. My ears were ringing and sweat streamed down my face. I wanted to hold on to something, but there was nothing to hold on to. I felt like throwing up, but there was nothing inside me that I could have thrown up. I tried deep breathing, hoping to refresh my mind by exchanging the air inside my body and giving my circulation a charge. But the clouds in my mind refused to hear. My body is so weak now, I thought, and in fact, I tried saying the words aloud. My body is so weak now! But my mouth had difficulty forming the words. If only I could see the stars, I thought, but I could not see the stars. May Kasahara had sealed the mouth of the well. I assumed that May Kasahara would come to the well again sometime during the morning, but she never did. I spent the time waiting for her to arrive, leaning against the wall. The sick feeling stayed with me all morning, and my mind had lost the power to concentrate itself on any thoughts, however briefly. The hunger pangs continued to come and go, and the darkness around me grew thicker and thinner, and with each new wave, another chunk of my ability to concentrate would be taken away. Like furniture being stripped, a piece at a time by burglars in an empty house. Noon passed, and still May Kasahara did not appear. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, hoping to dream of Kretakano, but my sleep was too shallow for dreams. Not long after I gave up any effort to concentrate of thinking, all kinds of fragmentary memories began to visit me. They arrived in silence, like water slowly filling an underground cavern. Places I had gone, people I had met, wounds I had received, conversations I had had, things I had bought, things I had lost. I was able to recall them all with great vividness and in amazing detail. I thought of houses and apartments in which I had lived. I thought of their windows and closets and furniture and lighting fixtures. I thought of teachers and professors I had had, all the way from elementary school to college. Few, if any, of these memories had any connection with each other. They were minute and meaningless and came in no chronological order. Now and then, my recollections would be interrupted by another painful wave of hunger. but each memory was incredibly vivid, jolting me physically with the force of a tornado. I sat there watching my mind pursue these memories until it brought to life an incident that had occurred in the office some 3 or 4 years earlier. It had been a stupid, pointless event, but the more time I filled with recreating its absurd details, the more annoyed I felt, until the annoyance turned to outright anger. The anger that seized me was so intense that it blotted out everything else: my fatigue, my hunger, my fears, causing me to tremble physically and my breath to come in gasps. My heart pounded audibly, and the anger pumped my bloodstream full of adrenaline. It had been an argument that started from a minor misunderstanding. The other guy had flung some nasty phrases at me, and I had managed to have my say as well, but we both realized how pointless the whole thing had been and apologized to each other, putting an end to the matter without any lingering hard feelings. These things happen. You're busy, you're tired, and you let some careless remarks slip out. I just forgot about the whole thing. Down in the pitch blackness at the bottom of the well, though far removed from reality, the memory came back to life with searing vividness. I could feel the heat of it against my skin, hearing it sizzling my flesh. Why had my response to such an outrageous comment been so feeble? Now I came up with all kinds of things I should have said to the guy. I polished them, sharpened them, and the sharper they got, the angrier I got. Then all of a sudden, the possessing demon fell away, and none of this mattered anymore. Why did I have to warm up stale memories like this? What good did it do? The other guy had probably forgotten about the argument long since. I certainly had until this moment. I took a deep breath, let my shoulders droop, and my body sink back into the darkness. I tried pursuing another memory, but once the incredibly intense anger passed, I had run out of memories. My head was now as empty as my stomach. Then, before I knew it, I was talking to myself, mumbling fragmentary thoughts that I didn't know I was having. I couldn't stop myself. I heard my mouth forming words, but I could hardly understand the thing I was saying. My mouth was moving by itself, automatically, speaking long strings of words through the darkness, words the meaning of which I could not grasp. They came out of one darkness to be sucked into the next. My body was nothing but an empty tunnel, a conduit for moving the words from there to here. They were definitely fragments of thought, but thought that was happening outside my consciousness. What was going on here? Were my nerves beginning to lose it? I looked at my watch. The hands said 3:42, probably 3:42 in the afternoon. I pictured to myself what the light looked like at 3:42 on a summer afternoon. I imagined myself in that light. I listened for any sound my ears might pick up, but there was nothing. No cicada, no bird cries, no children's voices. Maybe while I was down here in the well, the wind-up bird had not warned the spring, and the world had stopped moving. Bit by bit, the spring had run down, and at one certain point in time, all movement, the river's flow, the stirring of leaves, birds flying through the sky, had stopped. What was May Kasahara doing? Why didn't she come? She hadn't shown up here for a very long time. The thought struck me that something terrible might have happened to her. A traffic accident, say, in which case there was no longer anyone in the world who knew I was down here. And I really would die a slow death in the bottom of the well. I decided to look at things differently. May Kasahara was not such a careless person. She was not about to let herself get run over so easily. She was probably in her room now, scanning this yard every once in a while with her binoculars and imagining me down here in the well. She was doing this on purpose, letting a lot of time go by to give me a scare, to make me feel abandoned. That was my guess. And if she was purposely letting a lot of time go by, then her plan was succeeding admirably. I really was scared. I did feel abandoned. Whenever the thought struck me that I might very well just rot down here in the dark over a long period of time, I could hardly breathe with the fear that gripped me. The more time that went by, the more I would weaken until my hunger pangs became violent enough to kill me. Before that happened, though, I might lose the ability to move my body at will. Even if someone were to lower the rope ladder to me, I might not be able to climb it. All my hair and teeth might fall out. Then it occurred to me to worry about the air. I had been down in the bottom of this deep, narrow concrete tube over 2 days now, and to make matters worse, the top had been sealed. There was no circulation to speak of. The air around me suddenly began to feel heavy and oppressive. I couldn't tell whether this was my imagination playing tricks on me or the air really was heavier because of the lack of oxygen. To find out, I made several large inhalations and exhalations, but the more I breathed, the worse it felt. Fear made the sweat gush out of me. Once I started thinking about the air, death invaded my mind as something real and imminent. It rose like black, silent water, seeping into every corner of my consciousness. Until now, I had been thinking about the possibility of starvation, for which there was still plenty of time. Things would happen much more quickly if the oxygen gave out. What would it feel like to die of asphyxiation? How long would it take? Would it be a slow, agonizing process? Or would I gradually lose consciousness and die as if falling asleep? I imagined Mekasahara coming to the well and finding me dead. She would call out to me several times, and when there was no answer, she would drop a few pebbles into the well, thinking I was asleep. But I would not wake up. Then she would realize that I was dead. I wanted to shout for someone. I wanted to scream that I was shut up inside here, that I was hungry, that the air was going bad. I felt as if I had reverted to being a helpless little child. I had run away on a whim and would never be able to find my home again. I had forgotten the way. It was a dream I had had any number of times. It was the nightmare of my youth, going astray, losing the way home. I had forgotten all about those nightmares years ago, but now, in the bottom of this deep well, they came to life again with terrible vividness. Time moved backward in the dark, to be swallowed by a different kind of time. I took the canteen from my knapsack, unscrewed the top, and with the greatest care, so as not to spill a single drop, let a small amount of water find its way into my mouth. I kept it there for a long time, savoring the moisture, then swallowed it as slowly as possible. A loud sound came from my throat as the water passed through, as if some hard, heavy object had fallen to the floor. But it was just the sound I made by swallowing a few drops of water. "Mr. Okada!" Someone was calling me. I heard the voice in my sleep. "Mr. Okada! Mr. Okada! Please wake up!" It sounded like Kretakano. I managed to open my eyes, but that changed nothing. I was still surrounded by darkness and I couldn't see a thing. There was no clear border between sleep and wakefulness. I tried to raise myself, but there was not enough strength in my fingers. My body felt cold and shriveled and dull, like a cucumber long forgotten in the back of the refrigerator. My mind was wrapped tight in exhaustion and weakness. I don't care, do what you want. I'll get a hard-on in my mind again and come in reality. Go ahead, if that's what you want. In my clouded consciousness, I waited for her hands to loosen my belt, but Kretakano's voice was coming from somewhere far overhead. "Mr. Okada! Mr. Okada!" it called. I looked up to find half the well cover open, and above it a beautiful starry sky, a sky shaped like a half moon. "I'm here." I raised myself and managed to stand. "I'm here." I raised myself and managed to stand. Looking up, I shouted again. "I'm here." "Mr. Okada," said the real Kretakano. "Are you down there?" "Yes, I'm here." "How did that happen?" "It's a long story." "I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well. Can you speak a little louder?" "It's a long story," I shouted. "I'll tell you about it after I get out of here. Right now, I can't speak very loudly." "Is this your rope ladder up here?" "Yes, it is." "How did you manage to raise it from there? Did you throw it?" "Of course not. Why would I have done such a thing?" "How could I have done such a thing?" "Of course not. Somebody pulled it up without telling me." "But that would just make it impossible for you to get out of there." "Of course it would," I said, as patiently as I could manage. "That's what happened. I can't get out of here. So can you do me a favor and let the ladder down? That way, I can get out." "Yes, of course. I'll do it now." "Wait a minute. Before you let it down, can you make sure it's anchored to the base of the tree? Otherwise..." But she was not responding. It seemed there was no one there anymore. I focused as hard as I could on the well mouth, but I couldn't see anyone. I took the flashlight from my sack and aimed its beam aloft, but the light caught no human form. What it did reveal was the rope ladder, hanging where it belonged, as if it had been there all the time. I released a deep sigh, and as it left me, I felt a hard knot at the core of my body relax and melt away. "Hey there, Kretakano!" I shouted, but there was still no answer. The hands on my watch showed 1:07. 1:07 at night, of course. The stars twinkling overhead told me that much. I slipped my knapsack on my back, took one deep breath, and started up. The unstable rope ladder was difficult to climb. With each exertion, every muscle, every bone and joint in my body creaked and cried out. I took one careful step at a time, and soon there was a growing hint of warmth in the surrounding area, and then a distinct smell of grass. The cries of insects reached me now. I got my hands on the edge of the well curve, and with one last effort pulled myself over, all but rolling onto the soft surface of the earth. That was it. I was above ground again. For a while, I simply lay there on my back, thinking of nothing. I looked up at the sky and sucked the air deep into my lungs over and over, the thick, warmish air of a summer night, filled with the fresh smell of life. I could smell the earth, smell the grass. The smell alone was enough to give my palms the soft sensation of touching the earth and the grass. I wanted to take them both in my hands and devour them. There were no longer any stars to be seen in the sky, not one. The stars up there were visible only from the bottom of a well. All that hung in the sky was a nearly full, corpulent moon. How long I went on lying there, I had no idea. For a long time, all I did was listen to the beating of my heart. I felt that I could go on living forever, doing only that, listening to the beating of my heart. Eventually, though, I raised myself from the ground and surveyed my surroundings. No one was there. The garden stretched out into the night, with the statue of the bird staring off at the sky as always. No light shone inside me Kasahara's house. There was only one mercury lamp burning in her yard, casting its pale, expressionless light as far as the deserted alley. Where could Kretakana have disappeared to? In any case, the first thing to do was to go home. To go home, drink something, eat something, and take a nice long shower. I probably stank something awful. I had to get rid of the smell before anything else. Then I had to fill my empty stomach. Everything else would come later. I followed the usual route back home, but to my eyes the alley looked different, unfamiliar. Maybe because of the strangely naked moonlight, signs of stagnation and putrefaction stood out with unusual intensity, and I could smell something like the rotting flesh of dead animals and the very definite stink of feces and urine. In many of the houses, people were still up, talking or eating while they watched television. From one window drifted the smell of greasy food, assaulting my brain and stomach. I passed by a groaning air conditioning unit and received a bath of lukewarm air. I heard the sound of a shower and saw the blurred shadow of a body on a bathroom window. I managed to scale the wall behind my house and dropped down into the yard. From here, the house looked pitch dark and almost seemed to be holding its breath. It retained no sense of warmth or intimacy. It was supposed to be the house where I was carrying on my life day after day. But now it was just an empty building without a trace of humanity. If I had any home to go back to, though, this was it. I stepped up to the veranda and slipped open the glass door. Having been shut up for so long, the air was heavy and stagnant. It smelled like a mixture of overripe fruit and insecticide. The short note I had left on the kitchen table was still there. The dishes I had washed remained in the same arrangement on the drain board. From the stack, I took a glass and filled it over and over again, drinking water from the tap. The refrigerator had nothing special in it. A haphazard collection of leftovers and partly used ingredients: eggs, ham, potato salad, eggplant, lettuce, tomatoes, tofu, cream cheese, milk. I poured some of the milk on the bowl of cornflakes and ate that. I should have been starved, but after beholding actual food in the refrigerator, I felt hardly any hunger. If anything, I was a little nauseated. Still, to soften the pain of my empty stomach, I followed the cornflakes with a few crackers. These did nothing to make me want to eat more. I went to the bathroom, took all my clothes off, and threw them into the washing machine. Stepping under a hot shower, I scrubbed every inch of my body and washed my hair. Kumiko's nylon shower cap still hung in the bathroom. Her special shampoo was there, her conditioner, and the plastic brush she used for shampooing. Her toothbrush, her floss, everything looked the same as it had before she left. The only change brought about by her absence was that one simple fact: Kumiko was no longer there. I stood before the mirror and examined my face. It was covered with black stubble. After a moment of hesitation, I decided not to shave. If I shaved now, I would probably cut myself. Tomorrow morning would be fine. I didn't have to see anybody. I brushed my teeth, rinsed my mouth out several times, and left the bathroom. Then I opened a beer, took tomato and lettuce from the refrigerator, and made a salad. Once I had eaten that, I began to feel some desire for food. So I took out some potato salad, spread it between 2 pieces of bread, and ate it. I looked at the clock only once. How many hours had I been down in the well? But just thinking about the time made my head throb. No, I did not want to think about time. That was the one thing I most wanted to avoid thinking about now. I went to the toilet and took a long pee with my eyes closed. I could hardly believe how long it lasted. I felt I might pass out while I was standing there. Afterward, I went to the living room, stretched out on the sofa, and stared at the ceiling. It was the strangest feeling. My body was tired, but my mind was wide awake. I didn't feel the least bit sleepy. It suddenly occurred to me to check the mailbox. Someone might have written to me while I was in the well. I went to the entryway and found that a single letter had arrived. The envelope bore no return address, but the handwriting on the front was obviously Kumiko's, its tiny character written, almost drawn with great precision, like a design. It was a time-consuming style of writing, but it was the only way she knew. My eyes went immediately to the postmark. It was smudged and barely legible, but I could make out the characters Taka and possibly Motsu. Takamatsu in Kagawa Prefecture? Kumiko didn't know anyone in Takamatsu, as far as I was aware. The two of us had never gone there, and she had never said anything about having taken the ferry to Shikoku or crossed the new bridge. The name Takamatsu had simply never entered any of our conversations. Maybe it wasn't Takamatsu. In any case, I brought the letter to the kitchen, sat down at the table, and used a scissor to open the envelope, taking care not to cut the stationery within. To calm myself, I took a swallow of my leftover beer. "You must have been shocked and worried when I disappeared so suddenly without a word," Kumiko had written in her usual Mont Black blue-black ink. The paper was the standard thin letter paper sold everywhere. "I meant to write to you sooner and do a proper job of explaining everything, but the time slid by while I went on brooding about how I could express my feelings precisely or explain my present situation so that you would understand. I feel very bad about this for you. You may have begun to suspect by now that I was seeing a man. I was sexually involved with him for close to 3 months. He was someone I met through work, someone you don't know at all, nor does it matter very much who he was. I will never see him again. For me, at least, it is over. This may or may not be of some comfort to you. Was I in love with him? There is no way I can answer that question. The question itself seems irrelevant. Was I in love with you? To that I can answer without hesitation. Yes, I was always extremely glad that I had married you, and I still feel that way. So why, you might ask, did I have to have an affair and, to top it off, run away from home? I asked myself the same question over and over again while it was happening. Why do I have to be doing this? There is no way I can explain it. I never had the slightest desire to take a lover or have an affair. Such thoughts were the farthest thing from my mind when I first started seeing him. We met a few times in connection with business, and though we did find it easy to talk to each other, the most that happened after that was an occasional remark on the phone that went beyond business. He was much older than I, had a wife and children, and was not particularly attractive to me as a man. It never occurred to me that I might become seriously involved with him. This is not to say that I was entirely free of thoughts about getting even with you. It still rankled me that you had once spent the night with a certain woman. I believed you when you said you hadn't done anything with her, but the mere fact that you hadn't done anything with her didn't make it right. It was just how I felt, but still, I didn't have an affair in order to get even with you. I remember I once said I would, but that was only a threat. I slept with him because I wanted to sleep with him, because I couldn't bear not to sleep with him, because I couldn't suppress my own sexual desire. We had not seen each other for some time. When we met on a business matter, we followed this with dinner and then went somewhere for a quick drink. Since I can drink, of course, all I had, to be sociable, was a glass of orange juice without a drop of alcohol in it. So alcohol had nothing to do with what happened. We were just talking and eating in the most ordinary way. But then, one moment, by accident, we touched, and all I could think of was that I wanted to be in his arms. The instant we touched, I knew that he wanted my body, and he seemed to sense that I wanted his. It was totally irrational, overwhelming charge of electricity that passed between us. I felt as if the sky had fallen on me. My cheeks were burning, my heart was pounding, and I had a heavy melting feeling below the waist. I could hardly sit straight on the bar stool. It was so intense. At first, I didn't realize what was happening inside me, but soon I realized it was lust. I had such a violent desire for him that I could hardly breathe. Without either of us being the first to suggest it, we walked to a nearby hotel and went wild with sex. Writing it out graphically as this is probably going to hurt you, but I believe that in the long run, an honest, detailed account will be the best thing. It may be hard, but I want you to bear the pain and read on. What I did with him had virtually nothing to do with love. All I wanted was to be held by him and have him inside me. Never in my life had I experienced such suffocating need for a man's body. I had read about unbearable desire in books, but until that day I could never really imagine what such a phrase meant. Why this need arose in me so suddenly, why it happened not with you, but with someone else, I have no idea. But the desire I felt then was impossible to suppress, nor did I even try. Please understand, not for a moment did it occur to me that I was betraying you in any way. The sex I had in that hotel bed with him was something close to madness. To be totally honest, I had never in my life felt anything so good. No, it wasn't that simple. It didn't just feel good. My flesh was rolling in hot mud. My mind sucked in the sheer pleasure to the point of bursting, and then it burst. It was absolutely miraculous. It was one of the most wonderful things that had ever happened to me. And then, as you know, I kept it hidden all that time. You never realized that I was having an affair. You never doubted me, even when I began coming home late. I'm sure you trusted me completely. You thought I could never betray you. And for betraying this trust of yours, I had no sense of guilt. I would call you from the hotel room and say that work was going to keep me out late. I piled one lie on the top of another, but they caused me no pain. It seemed like the most natural thing in the world to do. My heart needed my life with you. The home I shared with you was the place where I belonged. It was the world I belonged to, but my body had this violent need for sex with him. Half of me was here and half there. I knew that sooner or later the break would have to come, but at the time it felt as if this double life would go on forever. Over here I was living peacefully with you, and over there I was making violent love with him. I want you to understand one thing at least. This was never a matter of your being sexually inferior to him, or lacking in sex appeal, or my being tired of sex with you. It was just that, at the time, my body experienced this violent, irrepressible hunger. I could do nothing to resist it. Why such things happen, I have no idea. All I can say is that it did happen. A few times during the weeks that I was sleeping with him, I thought about having sex with you too. It seemed unfair to me, for your sake, that I would sleep with him, but not with you. But in your arms, I had ceased to feel anything at all. You must have noticed. For close to 2 months, I made up all kinds of excuses to having sexual relations with you. But then one day, he asked me to leave you for him. We were so perfectly matched, he said, that there was no reason for us not to be together. He would leave his family, he said. I asked him to give me time to think about it. But on the train home after I left him that night, I realized that I no longer felt a thing for him. I don't understand it myself. But the moment he asked me to join him, that special something inside me disappeared, as if a strong wind had come up and blown it away. My desire for him was gone without a trace. That was when I started to feel guilty toward you. As I wrote earlier, I had felt nothing of the sort the whole time I was feeling intense desire for him. All I had felt was how convenient it was that you had noticed nothing. I thought I could get away with anything, as long as you failed to notice. My connection with him belonged to a different world from my connection with you. After my desire for him evaporated, though, I no longer knew where I was. I have always thought of myself as an honest person. True, I have my faults, but where important things were concerned, I never lied to anyone or deceived myself. I had never hidden anything from you. That had been one small source of pride for me. But then, for months, I went on telling you those fatal lies without a twinge of regret. That very fact is what started to torment me. It made me feel as if I were an empty, meaningless, worthless person. And in fact, that is probably what I am. But there is one other thing, in addition, that continues to bother me. And that is, how did I suddenly come to feel such intense, abnormal sexual desire for a man I didn't even love? This is what I simply cannot grasp. If it hadn't been for that desire, I would still be enjoying my happy life with you, and that man would still be a nice friend to chat with on occasion. But that feeling, that incredible, overwhelming lust, tore down everything we had built up over the years. It took away everything that was mine. It took away you, and the home that we had made together, and my work. Why did such a thing have to happen? After I had my abortion 3 years ago, I told you that there was something I had to say to you. Do you remember? Perhaps I should have done it. Perhaps I should have told you everything that was in my heart before things came to this. This might never have happened if I had done so. But now that it has happened, even now, I don't believe that I would be able to tell you what I was feeling then. And that is because it seems to me that once I put it into words, things would be even more decisively ruined than they are now. Which is why I came to feel that the best thing I could do was to swallow it all and disappear. I am sorry to have to tell you this, but the fact is that I was never able to have true sexual pleasure with you, either before or after we were married. I loved it when you held me in your arms, but all I ever felt was a vague, far-off sense that almost seemed to belong to someone else. This in no way was your fault. My inability to feel was purely and simply my own responsibility. There was some kind of blockage inside me, which would always hold any sexual feeling I had in check. When, for reasons I cannot grasp, that blockage was swept away by sex with him, I no longer had any idea what I should do. There was always something very close and delicate between us, and you and me. It was there from the very beginning, but now it has been lost forever. That perfect meshing of the gears, that mythical something, has been destroyed. Because I destroyed it. Or more accurately, some kind of something made me destroy it. I am terribly sorry it ever happened. Not everyone is lucky enough to have such a chance as I had with you. I hate the thing that caused all this to happen. You have no idea how much I hate it. I want to know precisely what it is. I have to sort out its roots and judge and punish it. Whether I actually have the strength to do so, I cannot be sure. One thing is certain, however. This is my problem alone. It has nothing to do with you. I have only one thing to ask you, and that is this. Please don't concern yourself about me anymore. Please don't try to find me. Just forget about me and think about beginning a new life. Where my family is concerned, I will do the proper thing. I will write to them and explain that this is all my fault, that you are in no way responsible. They will not cause you any trouble. Formal divorce proceedings will begin fairly soon, I think. That will be best for both of us. So please don't protest. Just go along with them. As far as the clothing and other things I have left behind are concerned, I'm sorry, but please just dispose of them or donate them somewhere. Everything belongs to the past now. Anything I ever used in my life with you, I have no right to use now. Goodbye. I read the letter one more time from beginning to end and returned it to its envelope. Then I took another can of beer from the refrigerator and drank it. If Kumiko was planning to institute divorce proceedings, that meant she had no intention of killing herself right away. That gave me some relief. But then I ran up against the fact that I had not had sex with anyone for almost 2 months. As she had said in a letter, Kumiko had resisted sleeping with me all that time. She had symptoms of a mild bladder infection, she said, and the doctor had told her to refrain from sex for a while. And of course I had believed her. I had no reason not to. During those 2 months, I had had relations with women in my dreams, or in some world that, within the limits of my vocabulary, I could only call a dream, with Greta Kano and with the telephone woman. But now that I thought about it, 2 months had gone by since the last time I had slept with a real woman in the real world. Lying on the sofa, staring at my own hands atop my chest, I thought about the last time I had seen Kumiko's body. I thought about the soft curve of her back when I zipped her dress up, and the smell of cologne behind her ears. If what she said in the letter was the irrevocable truth, however, I would probably never sleep with Kumiko again. She had written it with such clarity and finality. What else could it be but the irrevocable truth? The more I thought about the possibility that my relationship with Kumiko had become a thing of the past, the more I began to miss the gentle warmth of that body that had once belonged to me. I had enjoyed sleeping with her. Of course, I had enjoyed it before we were married. But even after some years had gone by and the initial thrill had faded somewhat, I enjoyed having sex with Kumiko. Her slender back, the nape of her neck, her legs, her breasts. I could recall the thoughts of every part of her with present vividness. I could recall all the things I had done for her and she had done for me in the course of our sexual union. But now, Kumiko had joined her body with that of someone I did not know, and with an intensity I could hardly imagine. She had discovered in that a pleasure she had been unable to obtain from sex with me. Probably while she was doing it with him, she had squirmed and writhed enough to make the bed toss and had released groans loud enough to be audible in the next room. She had probably done things with him that she would never have done with me. I went and opened the refrigerator, took out a beer and drank it. Then I ate some potato salad. Wanting to hear music, I turned on the FM radio, tuning into a classical station at a low volume. "I am so tired today," Kumiko would say. "I'm just not in the mood. I'm sorry. Really." I'd answer, "That's okay. No big deal." When Tchaikovsky's Serenade for Strings ended, a little piano piece came on that sounded like something by Schumann. It was familiar, but I couldn't recall the title. When it was over, the female announcer said it had been the seventh of Schumann's forest scenes, titled Bird as Prophet. I imagine Kumiko twisting her hips beneath the other man, raising her legs, planting her fingernails in his back, drooling on the sheets. The announcer explained that Schumann had created a scene of fantasy in which a mysterious bird lived in the forest, foretelling the future. What had I ever known about Kumiko? Soundlessly, I crossed the empty beer can in my hand and threw it into the trash. Could it be true that the Kumiko I had thought I understood, the Kumiko I had held close to me and joined my body with over the years as my wife, that Kumiko was nothing but the most superficial layer of the person Kumiko herself, just as the greater part of this world belongs in fact to the realm of the jellyfish? If so, what about those 6 years we had spent together? What had they been? What had they meant? I was reading Kumiko's letter yet again when the phone rang. The sound shot me out of the sofa. Who could possibly be calling at 2 in the morning? Kumiko? No, she would never call her. Probably Meika Sahara. She had seen me leave the empty house and decided to give me a call. Or possibly Kreta Kano. She wanted to explain why she had disappeared. It could be the telephone woman. She might be trying to convey some message to me. Meika Sahara had been right. There were just a few too many women around me. I wiped the sweat from my face with a towel that lay nearby, and when I was ready, I lifted the receiver. "Hello?" I said.
Hello?
Came the voice from the other end. It did not belong to Meika Sahara. Neither was it Kreta Kano's voice or the voice of the enigmatic woman. It was Malta Kano.
Hello?
She said.
Is that Mr. Okada? My name is Malta Kano. I wonder if you remember me.
Of course, I remember you very well, I said, trying to still the pounding of my heart. How could I not have remembered her?
I must apologize for telephoning you so late at night. This is something of an emergency, however. I fully recognized what a rude intrusion this would be and how angry it must make you, but I felt compelled to place the call nevertheless. I am terribly sorry.
She needed not to be concerned, I assured her. I was up, in any case, and not the least bit bothered.